Hello and welcome to ANC Decides, the show that gives you up-to-the-minute comments, reports and analysis as and when they happen. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalani. Now, today in studio, we're joined by our reporters. You've seen them. They've crisscrossed the provinces. We've got Nomusa Pumula as well as Natasha Piri. And then we're also joined by Editor-in-Chief Mohsin Williams as well as political analyst Papano Pasha. Panel, welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Perhaps to start with you, Mohsin. Just the coverage thus far. For 3 months as ANC7, we've gone on to cover this elective conference, the most contested elective conference in the history of the ANC. What has been your experience thus far?
Well, I think our staff reporters in the field, like Nomusa and Tash, they've done an outstanding job. Because for me, of course, I work at ANC7, but also as a viewer, it gave me a real sense of the issues on the ground in the most remote parts of the country and how the ANC and democracy works in the party. So it's been an extremely useful exercise, I think, for our viewers, that we were able to get the views of ordinary members. Of course, gathered here over the next few days are the ordinary members of the ANC, the rank and file, who are here as delegates, and they will be the voting delegates. And of course, they will determine the leadership and, of course, to my mind, more important, the policy resolutions that, of course, will affect the future of the country. So we've had a very good taste of the ideas and the thoughts and the views of ANC members on the ground. So it's been an outstanding 3 months as far as I think ANC Decides was concerned.
Papano, your take? Because many were critical of this race, saying that there's less policy that is coming out, but more perhaps personalities. Many are talking about this is my preferred candidate as opposed to what they stand for. But the picture became a bit clearer as we got closer to the day. But what has been your experience thus far?
Well, I think many of us have learned a lot, and thank you to the media, in particular ANC7, because you went to areas where many media houses would not go to. I mean, for me, it was quite significant to see people in the villages, the likes of Nomusa, going to the deepest rural areas and telling us what ordinary branch members are saying in their views. So for me, I think that was the most significant thing. But over and above that, I think outside of, what the media were trying to portray, because if you looked at, the various media houses, the analysis were mainly on personalities. But as time went on, we were able to dig deep into the characters of these contestants. And I think going forward, media alternative houses like ANC7, they're quite critical because they don't only zoom into what we hear, they zoom into the deeper issues. And I think for me that is critical. Going forward, I think it's going to be an interesting conference. I hope that it's not going to be a contest of chess. I think I hope delegates are going to focus on policies, because outside of this conference, it's about policies, it's about implementation. So I think personalities aside, I'm hoping that branch delegates will be focused on what needs to be done, and that is policy articulation.
They seem to be pushing for unity and this discipline. Natasha, welcome back to Johannesburg. You covered Limpopo and Mpumalanga. The most recent story is that of pocket money from Mpumalanga. Just take us through some of your experiences in these two provinces.
Fundo, it was actually quite interesting, gauging the atmosphere, the views of the branch delegates as they actually are, so important heading up to the elective conference. But as you've recently stated, I was in Limpopo, I was in Mpumalanga, very, very interesting times, especially in Mpumalanga. We've heard there are, allegations against Ubabdidi Mabuza, saying that he has his own personal militia. And of course, the PEC in the region had actually refuted those claims and said that Matthews Posa is acting out of desperation. The recent court cases we've seen as well have been nullified out of court. But you also raised the point of the SACP. We had an interview with the regional leadership of the SACP, I beg your pardon, provincial leadership, and they actually raised funds for them, pocket money as they put it, so in a bid to ensure that delegates are actually not bribed or tempted. And where the SACP was coming from is that they're actually raising it more specifically for those branch delegates who aren't employed, who aren't working, because as they understand, they'd be easily tempted. But of course, we heard the DSG saying right here yesterday that this is uncalled for, this behavior is somewhat uncalled for. But also moving to Limpopo, Limpopo is quite a stronghold for Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. He emerged victorious, of course. Yes. We saw that there were also some disruptions as well at the PGC that we saw. And of course, Jesse Duarte, the DSG, also coming out holding no bars, saying that no such behavior will actually be tolerated, not even here at the conference. No ill discipline will be tolerated. We also saw some instances where BGM processes were flawed and the PEC dealt with those matters. Also moving back to Mpumalanga, I think one issue or one topic that really left the media confused was the 223 nominations, yes, unity votes. And, the buzzword in Mpumalanga was unity is sacrosanct. They're saying that despite NDZ, emerging victorious, theirs is to preach a message of unity, Fundo.
No, it's certainly been very interesting in these two provinces. And then Nomusa, yours, KZN. Unfortunately, when many talk of KZN, they cannot divorce the province from the political killings. Take us through your journey covering KZN.
Well, thank you so much, Mfundo. Well, I can say that the journey started very tense. As you would remember that we started in the Eastern Cape with their Eastern Cape Provincial Elective Conference, where we saw words like Festival of Chairs flying around, where people got injured. But nevertheless, the conference continued, and we saw Oscar Mabuyane emerging as a chairperson of that province. However, in all that has happened in the Eastern Cape, I must say that the CR17 campaign seemed to have a very strong hold in the Eastern Cape. You'll remember that during the provincial conference, all the delegates that were supporting Oscar Mabuyane were saying that they are not dividing the two campaigns. Oscar Mabuyane, which was OM17, was running concurrently with CR17. Now, after all that was done, we also saw a court case also emerging in the Eastern Cape, where the other side now, that most or some of the delegates that had left the conference because they felt that that conference was no longer safe for them to continue. They then filed a court case, which we saw in the last day being chased out of court or being said to not have the grounds to stand to be brought to court. However, nevertheless, Eastern Cape remains firm and behind Cyril Ramaphosa. But when we look at KZN on the other side, there were many allegations of BGMs being flawed, some saying that the regional deployees, the REC deployees, would purposefully make sure that the BGMs don't sit. That is why at some point, whenever we spoke to the secretary of the province, he would say, it is not proper for me to give you numbers now, because it gives those other people an opportunity now to make sure that if those branches are not in their favor, then they make sure that they either disrupt or make sure that those branches don't sit.
That one was, it seemed to be an accusation that went on both sides, that if you found a PEC in a specific province that was in support of CR17, you had NDZ saying that some of their branches were frustrated, they didn't get to sit, and similarly in the other camps. So with that said, in KZN, did you find that perhaps the CR17 branches were indeed frustrated and couldn't sit?
Both camps were frustrated, because at some point you would find that there were branches that had appealed after their BGMs had been said to be flawed, and you'd find that one of those branches was, in KZN, for example, was Ward 37 at Etegwini, which is the ward that is in support of CR17, and that ward had to go for a BGM again, and you'd find that those that are supporting NDZ as well, they would say that yes, ours was also a flawed, but on the other side, they would say, we are not going to appeal, we are not going to take anyone to court, we accept all the democratic processes of the African National Congress.
Cape? Was that KZN? In KZN. And in the Eastern Cape, did we see perhaps the same thing happen, where NDZ now is not particularly strong, but those few branches, were they frustrated there?
Same situation, Fundo. You'd find that they would appeal, and if they are not granted reruns, they would say that these processes are not followed properly. But also you would remember that wherever you see CR17 having a stronghold or NDZ having a stronghold. For example, in Eastern Cape, we once had an interview with Ward 46, which was set to have their BGM that evening. However, when we spoke to them the following day, they reported to us that the REC deployee never pitched. So therefore, they never managed to sit for their BGM. Till today, we could not tell whether that BGM ended up sitting or not. But with the information we got, they did not manage to sit.
Mohsin, the bigger picture here. We started with 7 candidates. Everybody had raised concern regarding the proliferation of the candidates this year. We asked, is it ambition among ANC members, or it's merely them wanting to assist where the ANC has gone wrong, to just bring it back on the direction it should have been traversing? But now we keep talking CR17 and NDZ. What would you say of these other candidates? Because what I do note is that most of them were slateless campaigns. They didn't actually have a slate. Lindiwe Sisulu, Zweli Mkhize, Matthews Posa, Baleka Mbete, Jeff Radebe, they had no slate. But they have said they discouraged the slate culture. But those that had slates are the ones we're talking about today.
Look, democracy in the ANC means that anybody can, any person, any member of good standing can throw their hat into the ring. Of course, some of them, I would assume most of them, were nominated by branches. So even though some of the nominations were fairly small in number in terms of some of the candidates, overall I think there were really only 2 candidates in the race from the beginning, and one always had the sense that the rest would fall out as a campaign.
What about Zweli Mkhize? We gave him quite a lot of coverage. A number of media houses spoke about him as that dark horse, and many thought he'd really become the president.
Look, I was actually surprised, and maybe Musa can comment on it, about the small number of nominations he received in his home province of KwaZulu-Natal. So again, the race really for the leadership of the organization was pitted between NDZ and Cyril Ramaphosa, So it was obvious from the very beginning that the other candidate would fall out. Of course, I think the deputy president on Cyril Ramaphosa's side, of course, that was an interesting one, where we have seen, that Naledi Pandor was really just a stalking horse, to bring in another candidate there in the form of Lindiwe. So yes, I think democracy allows people in the ANC to stand for whatever position they want to stand for, and I think that happened. And it has happened previously in elective conferences, 2007, 2012. We had the same situation where there were a number of other candidates, and only 2 really emerged very strongly towards the end.
Papano, it's just literally a day to go before the conference officially opens. Do you see perhaps some being nominated from the floor at this point, even if it's part of those 7 or anybody else? Do you foresee that happening, or you believe that it's obvious it's between these 2?
Well, it has happened before where you find that one candidate who is not necessarily popular in branches would get nominated from the floor. But I think perhaps just to go back to the question that you asked initially in terms of the 7 candidates. I mean, if you look at the 7 candidates, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was an underdog, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the campaign itself, especially of Zweli Mkhize, Zweli Mkhize has been campaigning a lot in Gauteng. In fact, just last week he was in Johannesburg, and he's very close to the Gauteng Provincial Conference. Now, also, if you take Lindiwe Sisulu, also if you take Baleka Mbete, I'm not too sure about Jeff Radebe. So my analysis has been the 6 or the 5 other candidates. It was a way to, manage, if not minimize, the numbers from Nkosazana Zuma. For example, Lindiwe Sisulu was talking about a female candidate, the importance of a female candidate. So in a way, it was one way to actually divide the female voters, because I don't think the campaign itself was genuine enough. We know that from Gauteng, there are many branches which had already pursued her or pushed her as a deputy president and not necessarily as a president. And perhaps it speaks, and I do not want to make it a gender question, but perhaps it speaks to females or women as a whole within the ANC? Is it difficult for women to stand together and support each other? I mean, in the history of the ANC, there's never been a female president.
But they could say it's their constitutional right to stand. Balega said it's her right to stand. So it was Lindiwe's right as well. So do they necessarily have to stand together? Because there were men there. If we're going to put this pressure on women to say, let's rally behind one, but there were men that were also in the race and they didn't decide to say, let's support one male.
But the difference between women and men is that there's never been a female president within the ANC. Now, if you want, you know, the ANC is part of society, and the ANC is equally patriarchal. So for women to contest within the ANC, it's important that women are supposed to find each other, and not necessarily find each other based on personalities, but what, you know, female leaders bring forth, you know, in regards to the quality of their leadership, in regards to, you know, what they actually stand for. So it will not be out of hand to say that women were supposed to rally together as an equal voice. I think it's going to be an indictment that going into this conference, you know, females are going to be divided, because men in many instances, when it comes, you know, to voting, they act as a unit. I can tell you, you might find that as Willem Kiese might be in the top 6 in terms of nomination.
Some could still argue that it's empowering to differ as women.
No.
We don't all have to go one route because men differ. Let us differ. While some might share your sentiments that if they are a grouping of women, they need to stick together. But hey, I suppose we'll have both sides here. But Natasha, on the unity call, did you really observe unity in the provinces that you went to, or there were instances where you thought, you know, I'm not sure if the ANC has internalized what unity means. It's not just expressing the word, saying unity, but we must be able to see it on the ground. Did you see unity on the ground?
In terms of Limpopo, some branches, yes, some branches, no. Like you said, the ANC has been reiterating the call of unity and backing, you know, one president. But in terms of Limpopo, we didn't see that. I remember through my live crossing about last week, Monday, at Limpopo's PGC, I saw the total opposite of unity, where an NDZ supporter sought to speak out on the channel, and unfortunately was actually booed by CR17 supporters, saying that they actually don't recognize the fellow. But in terms of Mpumalanga really stood out for me, as they were somewhat deemed as the most unified province, saying that the ANC had declared this year as the year of Oliver Reginald Tambo, which was the longest serving ANC president. They stood under the banner of unity. And they further called that every other province emulate what Mpumalanga was actually standing for, which is unity. And like I've said before, the buzzword in Mpumalanga was unity is sacrosanct. And this is what Didi Mabuza has been standing by, saying that unity is decisive leadership in order to actually avoid any slates from coming out of this conference.
Talk to us about the Youth League, though, in Limpopo, because the Youth League seemed to differ with the PEC quite a lot. And we've had a lot of conversations here on ANC Decides, even with Papano, and a number of people say, no, the premier there, the chair, does not have control of that province. But here, they emerged and they had support for CR17. We thought that that was fertile ground for any candidate to campaign, but they united behind CR17.
By my understanding, the Youth League itself is also in divisions, exactly. Because when speaking to Chair Selane, some other CR17 supporters did not actually recognize Chair Selane, saying that the Youth League in the province had actually taken a stance, despite the Youth League nationally saying that they'd garner support for NDZ. But you found some factions within Limpopo saying that our preferred candidate is actually Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and not Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. What was actually interesting that he was actually attacked live on national television, his own people not recognizing him. So they really have to question, unity within the province. But in terms of, the ANC Youth League not actually recognizing the PEC, more especially the chairperson of the region, Stan Mathabat, and calling for him to step down, he basically said that the only person I don't recognize there is the likes of Chair Selane. So it seems as if, I don't know, there's somewhat divisions within the Youth League in the province in Fundo.
And then Nomusa Umzimkhulu, this year, they lost Cindy Somakatra. It's been a very emotional time for South Africans to see what has happened in KZN as we hear of more political killings. What was the community of Umzimkhulu's mood or sentiment towards just this process of nominations, or were some of them now disheartened or disillusioned, thinking we don't even want to partake in anything to do with politics, because here politics just divide us to the point where some lose their lives?
Well, indeed, Mfundo, but before I go to your question, just to answer the question of the 7 candidates where we saw Dr. Zweli Mkhize receiving only 6 nominations from his home province. But what was most surprisingly was the one of Lindiwe Sisulu, when she got only 1 nomination in the Eastern Cape from the Sarabatman region. So it shows you that at the end of the day, the slates don't matter. What matters is what delegates from the ground want. But just to go back to your question now, the situation was and has been very tense in the Umzimkhulu sub-region, particularly when they had to go for their BGM. Every time there had to be security, which was very tight. At some point when we did a story there, we saw, or we had one of the leaders there saying that they are pleading with all the branches to submit their BGM dates to the police station, to the SAPS, so that they can provide necessary support in terms of security, so that they make sure that there is peace in all the BGMs. But however, they had been supporting NDZ throughout, saying that as much as she is a woman, they believe that besides her credentials, a woman has that thing of making sure that everyone is protected. They even made an example that was once made by Isilo Samabandla, King Kutu, saying that a woman in the past would shadow a person even if that person was a thief, and make sure that they protect that person from those people who are trying to kill them. So Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is that person that can unite this country, that can make sure that these people, they come back.
Are you campaigning, no more?
Just telling you what the branches were saying. On the other hand, same thing with CR17, saying that our country has been downgraded a number of times. He's the correct person to dig this country out of these problems that we've been getting economically. So both campaigns, they had those strong motivations for their particular candidate.
Our editor-in-chief, wrap it up for us. What should our viewers expect going forward here? We officially opened ANC Decides at Nasrec. Going forward, what is about to happen in terms of the processes of the ANC?
Well, I think, I think viewers will be surprised come next Tuesday, Wednesday, that the ANC will present a united front, as far as this conference is concerned. In terms of the race for the presidency, I think it's too close to call. My own personal assessment is that if Dr. Dlamini Zuma wins, it will probably be by 200 or 300 votes. And if Cyril Ramaphosa wins, it will be by the same margin. That's how close I think it is, out of 5,300 delegates. But, I try to say, and in some of the stuff that I've written for the New Age, is that the important issues really are the policy resolutions that will have to be adopted. And whichever leadership emerges, and of course the NEC is very important also. So I think viewers need to keep a careful eye on who will make up the 80 or so members of the ANC.
The amendments there because they want to give the NEC more power. So
exactly,
So it's
not just about who ends up in the presidency. And I think at the end of the day, an ANC president will be guided by the policy positions of the African National Congress going forward. And of course, I think the key issue that members and delegates must look at, of course, is how does the ANC emerge as a united organization with an eye on the 2019 elections, which is 18 months away. And that is going to be quite an important debate and discussion, I think, over the next few days,
Well, it has officially been opened by us at ANC Decides. Panel, thank you very much for joining us, and that's where we leave it until next time.
Yeah, no,